Why Alexandra had to visit Ellis Island in 1923 Season 2. Alexandra, Julia Schlapfer, had a harrowing trip through Ellis Island in 1923, but it wasn't entirely clear why she had to go through the notorious immigration processing station. Much of 1923 Season 2, Episode 3 was dedicated to Alexandra's first moments in America. Unfortunately, those moments were far from pleasant. Alexandra was forced to go through the immigration processing station at Ellis Island, several fully nude medical examinations, and rampant racism and bigotry. It was nearly as disturbing as Timothy Dalton's controversial 1923 scene, but there was a good reason it was included. Aside from showcasing the harsh realities of immigrating to America at the start of the 20th century, Alexandra's trip to Ellis Island is also a crucial part of her story. 1923 Season 2 has been very bleak and disturbing so far, and every member of the Dutton family tree has had hardships to deal with. Alexandra is no different, and 1923 Season 2 has actually been setting up her trials at Ellis Island for a long time. There's a simple reason Alexandra had to go to Ellis Island, and one character in 1923 actually explained it outright. There was a fairly simple reason Alexandra had to go through Ellis Island and its inspections instead of being allowed to disembark the ship. She didn't have any paperwork. As the guard on the boat noted, the higher-class passengers on the ship had travel documents that they sorted out at the U.S. Embassy in London prior to the journey, while Alexandra didn't. Since she didn't have any documents proving who she was or that she was married to a United States citizen, Alexandra was considered an undocumented immigrant and sent to Ellis Island. Unfortunately, Alexandra couldn't have gotten the paperwork she needed to avoid Ellis Island. Alexandra had to travel in secret, both because her family had disowned her and because she was a woman traveling by herself, and securing a travel visa would have immediately revealed her secret. She also didn't have the money required to get such a visa, as she had to sell all of her valuables just to earn enough to buy the ticket itself. One part of Alexandra's experience in Ellis Island stood out. The United States didn't allow pregnant women to immigrate into the country. There's a simple, albeit awful, reason for that. The U.S. didn't want undesirables to give birth to their mongrel children in the United States, as the U.S.'s birthright citizenship would make them Americans. The guards at Ellis Island and other immigration processing centers didn't want people of races they considered inferior to give birth in America. Alexandra was mistaken for an Irish immigrant, which was one of many ethnicities that were discriminated against at the time. From the late 19th to early 20th century, the United States experienced a huge wave of immigration, as many people from around the world fled from political instability, famine, disease, or poverty. Ellis Island was used as a processing center to inspect those immigrants, officially to prevent any transmittable diseases from spreading throughout America. Unofficially, however, many of the guards working at Ellis Island would turn away undesirables, a distinction usually made around biases like ableism, racism, and misogyny, via American Medical Association. Those workers would routinely prohibit the elderly, pregnant, disabled, or anyone else they considered to be bad for America from immigrating. Alexandra and countless people in real life had a horrifying experience at Ellis Island, but it could have been avoided. If Alexandra had gone to the U.S. Embassy and secured her travel documents, she would never have gone to Ellis Island in 1923. She would have been able to travel as Alexandra of Sussex, and her royal title would likely have given her special privileges instead of the abuse she suffered. Her marriage dispenser, however, took away all the benefits of Alexandra's connection to the English monarchy. Alternatively, if Spencer and Alexandra had been married on land instead of at sea, they would have had a valid marriage license. If Alexandra had a marriage license, she would have been able to prove that she was an American citizen by marriage, and she likely wouldn't have had to endure even a fraction of the abuse she did. She likely still would have gone to Ellis Island, but instead of submitting to a complete physical exam and intense interrogation, she would have been waved through rather easily in 1923. The fog hung low over New York Harbor as the steamship made its final approach to Ellis Island. The year was 1923, and Alexandra had never felt more uncertain in her life. She clutched the frayed edges of her travel coat, the once elegant fabric now bearing the wear of her tumultuous journey. She had not intended to find herself in this place, among weary immigrants and hopeful dreamers, but fate had conspired otherwise. Just months earlier, Alexandra had been on a very different path. Having fled London with the love of her life, Spencer Dutton, she had envisioned a new beginning in Montana, a life unburdened by aristocratic expectations and family constraints. But destiny had a cruel sense of humor. A series of misfortunes had separated her from Spencer once again, leaving her stranded in Italy with little more than her wits and determination. Word had come that Spencer had gone ahead to America, seeking to reclaim his family's land and name. Alexandra knew there was only one way to reach him, through the gates of Ellis Island. But her journey had been far from easy. The Atlantic crossing had been harrowing, a tempestuous sea mirroring the storm of emotions within her. She had spent days battling seasickness, kept company only by the other weary travelers packed into steerage. Now as the ship docked, Alexandra took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The line of passengers shuffled forward, each person carrying stories of hardship, loss, and hope. Alexandra held her documents tightly, hoping her passage would be smooth. She was no stranger to privilege, but here, in this place, titles and lineage meant nothing. She was simply another name on a manifest, another face in the crowd. Stepping onto the island, she was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. The grand dome ceiling of the main hall stretched above her, echoing with a cacophony of languages. Officers in crisp uniforms barked instructions, doctors inspected weary travelers, and clerks scribbled names into ledgers. Alexandra swallowed hard. This was the gateway to America, but for many, it was also a place of heartbreak. Some would be turned away, their dreams dashed upon the bureaucratic rocks of immigration law. Alexandra knew she had to prove herself. She had read about the medical examinations, the legal interviews, the uncertainty of it all. She had come from wealth, but she carried none of it now. No fine dresses, no servants, no letters of recommendation. Only the fire of determination burned within her. She moved through the line, trying to exude the confidence she once wore so effortlessly in English society. A doctor peered into her eyes, checked her hands for signs of illness, and waved her forward. The next hurdle was the legal inspection. An officer sat behind a wooden desk, his expression impassive as he leafed through the pages of his ledger. "Name?" he asked. "Alexandra Stafford," she said firmly, resisting the urge to add her noble title. Here she was simply Alexandra. Country of origin: England. Purpose of travel: she hesitated. She could not simply say she was chasing after love. That was not how the world worked. Instead, she squared her shoulders. To reunite with family, she said. It was not a complete lie. After all, she intended to make Spencer her family in every way that mattered. The officer studied her carefully before nodding. "Do you have a contact in America?" Alexandra's heart pounded. She had an address, scrawled hurriedly on a slip of paper, a place where she had been told she might find word of Spencer. "Yes," she said, producing the paper. The officer glanced at it, his face giving nothing away. "Welcome to America," he finally said, stamping her papers. Relief washed over her, nearly bringing her to tears. As she stepped out of the Great Hall, she saw the Statue of Liberty rising in the distance, a beacon of hope against the misty sky. The sight of it filled her with a new resolve. This was not just about finding Spencer. It was about proving to herself that she belonged in this world. She had left behind the life of a countess, trading it for something far more uncertain, but infinitely more real. Ellis Island had been the final test, a crucible through which she had passed. Now the true challenge lay ahead, navigating the vastness of America, finding Spencer, and carving out the life they had both dreamed of. As she descended the steps, she took one last look at the island, knowing she would never forget this place. It had been her gateway to a new future, a place where she had proven that love and determination were worth every sacrifice. She squared her shoulders and stepped onto the ferry. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt certain of one thing: she was exactly where she was meant to be.